What is up, guys? miHoYo has just posted new upcoming banners on their official Twitter, so I just want to make this video real quick to go over the characters and their constellations, as well as if she should be pulling on the weapon or the character banner, as well as give my opinion on Ganyu as to whether she'll be good or not. So as you guys can see here, the characters on the banner will be Noelle, Xingqiu, and XiangLing as the 4 stars, and Ganyu as the 5-star rate up units. And for the weapon banner, the weapons that will be rated up will be the Bell Claymore, Dragon's Bane Polearm, Eye of Perception Catalyst, Sacrificial Sword Longsword, and Favonius Warbow as the 4 stars. For the 5 stars, it will be Skyward Pride as the Claymore, and Amos Bow as the bow. Let's just get this out of the way real quick. I don't think any of these 4-star weapons are really worth pulling for. They're not really the best in slot for any character, except for the Sacrificial Sword is really good, but it will come back on other banners. Eye of Perception can be good on certain characters like Ningguang, but I feel like you're better off getting like Solar Pearl or getting a 5-star weapon for her. And for the 5-star weapons, I don't really think these are really that worthwhile. Amos Bow could possibly be really good for DPS Ganyu, but DPS Ganyu might not be so good unless you have C6 Ganyu. As well as, I'd rather have Skyward Harps to be able to be used on other characters and not just Amos Bow. At the end of the day, they are 5-star weapons, so if you do already have them or you end up pulling on this banner and grabbing them, then they are definitely worth using, but I would still not recommend that you pull on this weapon banner. Just wait for other weapon banners if you are going to pull on a weapon banner, unless you're a big fat whale. Now back to the character banner. We have Xingqiu, who is an amazing support as well as a semi-healer. We got Noelle, who is going to be a very good main DPS healer, battle bruiser, whatever you want to call her. Once 1.3 comes out, she's still even good now, but at C6 she's going to go crazy strong. And XiangLing, who has kind of fallen out of flavor with the new Abyss changes. However, she is still very good support for applying the pyro or doing some sort of overload reaction or whatever you guys are trying to do. Now before we go on to the 4-star character constellations, I really want to put emphasis on picking up even C0 Xingqiu. The reason why this is very important, even if you're not going to use him in combat, is because of his passive. His passive will allow you to save resin, where every time you go craft talent books, you will be able to get a partial refund on every craft. And now for the constellations. Xingqiu really honestly has a lot of really good constellations. His C1 is really not that important. It just increases the number of rain swords by 1. It just gives a little bit extra healing. His C2 is really strong, where it'll increase the burst duration by 3 seconds. His burst duration is normally only 15 seconds with a cooldown of 20 seconds, but if you have C2, it'll extend it to 18 seconds duration with 20-second cooldown. It'll also decrease the hydro resistance of opponents hit by the rain swords from his burst skill, and his C3 will increase his burst skill by 3 levels, which is really strong as well. His C4 is kind of good and sometimes not really that useful, where when you have your burst skill active, your elemental skill will be 50% stronger, which is actually really good. But the thing is that most people use their elemental skill into burst skill so that they make sure the hydro elemental particles go into Xingqiu. But if you have Sacrificial Sword, you could definitely do elemental skill, burst skill, elemental skill, or you could do burst skill, elemental skill. If you have Sacrificial, do burst, elemental. His C5 will just cause his elemental skill to go up by 3 levels, and his C6 is actually a really good one, where activating 2 swords from his elemental burst skill will cause the 3rd skill to have greatly increased damage. C6 will also allow Xingqiu to regenerate 3 energy every time sword rain attacks hit opponents. Keep in mind this is only 3 energy and not 3 energy particles, but this is still very helpful because his burst skill is one of the highest costing burst skills in the game at 80 energy cost. And now for how many copies of Xingqiu you should look to pull. If you're on an extreme budget, C0 is all you really need, just so that you get the passive to save some resin over time. But at the same time, you don't have to get C0 Xingqiu right now. He will be back on other banners or available in the shop or something like that. But if you're able to, C2 is really good to get as a support DPS, and C3 will push it even further, but you don't have to absolutely get it. C4 is not that necessary, C5 is not that necessary either, but C6 is really good to get if you can honestly get it, but don't push yourself, because once again, Xingqiu will be on other banners as well. For XiangLing, I've gone over constellations many of times, just like my shop video, so I'm just going to go over them really quickly for this video. C1's really good if you use a lot of pyro units. It reduces pyro resistance down. C2 is really good as a main DPS, but she's not a premier choice as a main DPS. C3 increases your pyronado, your burst skill, by 3 levels. C4 will increase your duration by 40%, which will make it from 10 seconds to 14-second duration, which is really nice as well. C5 just makes it so that your elemental skill goes up by 3 levels, and then C6 will make it so that all members get 15% increased pyro damage while your burst skill is active. Because XiangLing has slightly fallen out of flavor with the new Abyss changes, I don't think you really need to pull constellations for her, but you can get C1 if you do like to pair her with other pyro units, and you can get C3 and C4 if you want to use her as support DPS, because most of her damage does come from her burst skill. And now for Noelle, her C1 will make it so that you have a 100% chance to heal with your normal and charge attacks when you have your burst skill and elemental skill up at the same time. Her C2 will make it so that your charge attacks deal more damage and consume less stamina. Her C3 will make it so that your elemental skill goes up by 3 levels, Her C4 will make it so that when your elemental skill or your breastplate, your shield is expired or destroyed, you'll do 400% of your attack as geo damage. Her C5 will increase your elemental burst skill, your ultimate, by 3 levels, and her C6 will make it so that while you're in your burst skill, 50% of your defense will be added to your attack, as well as every time you kill an opponent, your burst skill will last for 1 second longer, up to 10 seconds longer. Her burst skill does last for 10 seconds and has 15-second cooldown. I do think Noelle's best role, especially after 1.3, is to be main DPS or battle maid or whatever you want to call it, so I don't really think her constellation is really that needed because these are really just there to help her with shielding or supporting. Her C1 is just helping her heal, which you don't need. C2 is just going to increase your charge attack damage, which you don't really need either. C3 just increases your shield, but after 1.3, 150% damage absorption shield comes into effect, you definitely don't need this that much, especially with 24-second cooldown. C4 is not good with the extra damage because you have 24-second cooldown elemental skill. It's not really that necessary. C5 does help your burst damage, which would be great, and C6 also helps your burst damage, which is also great, but it's not absolutely necessary. You're gonna have double geo units, so you can have your elemental particles come in a lot of the times. Noelle can't generate her own elemental or particles from her elemental skill, but like I said, other geo units like Zhongli or Albedo or Geo MC should be enough to supplement her to be able to get her burst skill off pretty quickly. And now for the big question, will Ganyu be good? I don't think she'll necessarily be great, but I do think people will have fun with her. Cryo main DPS doesn't really seem like it'll ever really work because they only have access to Freeze, Superconduct, and the weaker Melt. With Superconduct, the Cryo AoE damage is actually fairly weak. It's about a third or a quarter of the damage Overload and Electrocharge deal, and it only reduces Fizz resistance. That's not really going to help Ganyu as she's going to be mostly doing Cryo damage, if not all Cryo damage. Melt is a great reaction, however, you have to keep in mind that when you do main DPS Ganyu, you are going to be melting from Pyro into Cryo, which would only be a 1.5 times damage multiplier. At level 6 talents, you would have a Charge Arrow multiplier of 179.2. The second effect of the Charge Arrow would do 304%, and then the Elemental skill would do 184% damage, and then the Burst skill would do 98% damage per shard. The 1.5 times melt will be great if you can melt with the first and second part of the Charge Arrow, but I don't think that will be the case unless you put a strong or heavy pyro element on the target, but we'll talk more about strong versus weak element application in a little bit. And as for freeze, you won't be able to shatter, so it'll be more of a perma-freeze comp, and you'll only really be able to perma-freeze with Mona on the team. Keep in mind, Xingqiu's burst skill only fires when you deal normal attacks and not charge attacks. You can obviously swap to Barbara just to apply the Hydro and swap back to Ganyu to do a charge arrow, but I'm not too sure if you'd really want to do that. And if you are going to go for a perma-freeze build, you are going to have to build a really niche artifact set with just a bunch of crit damage on it. But also keep in mind, not all monsters have weak points. So like I said, I really don't think main DPS Ganyu will be good. I think it'll be a situation like C0 Child versus C6 Child, where C0 Ganyu won't be that great for main DPS, but C6 Ganyu will be pretty fun. This is the reason why C6 Ganyu will be fun, because after you use your elemental skill, your next Frostflake arrow shot or your charge arrow shot within 30 seconds will not require charging. And now for support Ganyu. I do think she will be one of the best, if not the best, support cryo unit. However, I do have concerns over her burst skill regarding size and cryo application speed. You can see here in this video her burst skill, and you will see the size is slightly bigger than Bennett's burst, but smaller than Albedo's elemental skill is what I'd like to say. Her burst does apply cryo at a fast speed, but when you take into account strong and weak element applications, this can be a bit of an issue. Alright, now let's quickly go over my concerns over size. I don't know about you guys, but I often knock people outside of Bennett and Albedo's fields when I'm fighting in the Abyss or any other place, but this obviously can be remedied by using Anemo users like Venti or Sucrose to hold them in place inside the field, but the monsters will usually die really quickly inside that field. This is definitely a lot bigger than Ganyu's field in the video, as you can see here, Albedo's size, so it is a little bit of a concern for me. Especially with having a 20-second cooldown and 60 energy cost, with likely being the only cryo unit on the team. And now for the big potential issue with support Ganyu. If you were not aware, there is such thing as strong versus weak element application, as well as element application cooldown. You'll see here when I use my Chong's elemental skill, it applies the cryo, and then when I use my Bennett's elemental skill, it gets rid of both cryo and pyro to do the melt reaction. However, if I go use the elemental skill again and use a cryo infused auto attack, you'll see the pyro is still lingering up top. The reason why the pyro lingers is because there's different types of element application strengths, and you can see at the top of this chart here, there's 3 different categories, with 1U being 9.5 seconds, 2U being 12 second duration, 4U being 16.8 second duration. This U stands for units, and this equivalent would be if 1 unit applied the same element to a target, 2 units applying the same element to a target, and 4 units applying the same element to a target. Because this is a video about Ganyu and Melt, we're only going to be really looking at the pyro units. You can see here that Diluc has an elemental application of 1U for his elemental skill and burst, as well as his infused autos. Klee has an elemental application of 2U for her elemental skill with the big bomb, and 1U with the mines, and 1U for the burst skill. Amber has 2U for her elemental skill and 1U for her burst skill. Bennett has an elemental strength of 2U on his elemental skill and his burst skill. XiangLing has a strength of only 1U for her skill and burst. Xinyan has a strength of 1U as well for burst and skill. And you can see here, Chong has a elemental application strength of 2U for his elemental skill on the initial hit, and 1U for his burst and infusions. Which explains why when you use Chong's elemental skill into Bennett's elemental skill, they both cancel out to get deleted. However, when you use Bennett's elemental skill into an infused auto attack, the pyro still lingers. Now, before we continue on that topic, I want to show you guys element application cooldown. You know that a lot of people like to use Chong plus Diluc, but a lot of people don't realize that when you put Chong's elemental skill out there with the cryo and then you put Diluc's pyro, you cannot apply another element for a little bit. You see there, I am attacking furiously. However, it took me a little while before I could apply that pyro again, or that cryo. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because there's a lot of people planning to use Ganyu with Klee, because apparently Ganyu is the only person that can keep up with Klee's pyro application, but if you take into consideration elemental application strength, as well as elemental application cooldown, it might not be the best scenario. Keep in mind her elemental skill has a pyro application strength of 2 for the big bomb, and Ganyu's elemental burst skill icicles will probably have an elemental application strength of 1. This imbalance of elemental application strength as well as elemental application cooldown might cause you to melt with your Ganyu's elemental burst skill more often than not, and with the multiplier of 98.38 with a 1.5 times melt multiplier, it might not be the best thing in the world. Also take into consideration what I said earlier about Ganyu's elemental burst size with knocking people out or killing people inside of it with no other enemies left inside of it with 20-second cooldown. Ganyu might not be the best support or the best addition to a team, and I might want to stick with Vaporize instead. We'll see when Ganyu comes out in a few days. I will be pulling for her and testing her out as a main DPS and as a support, whether my fears will be true or not. That's going to be all for this video. Please do consider leaving a like, comment down below what you guys think about Ganyu as well as these banners. Subscribe for more Genshin related content, join my Discord to talk about Genshin related things, and follow me on Twitch if you guys want to see me pull for Ganyu as well as test Ganyu out. Follow me on my socials such as Twitter and Instagram if you guys want quick, fast, up-to-date news on the game as well as leaks. Thanks for watching and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.